All right, we're back. It is COMP1004 Rapid Application Development here at Georgian, and it's the fall 2016 semester, and we are part one, lesson 10, part one of our broadcast, and we're talking about a couple things. Some announcements from Microsoft recently with Visual Studio for Microsoft. I want to show you something. This is because we're talking about rapid application development, and it's not just about Microsoft. It's also rapid application development cross-platform, Linux and Mac, which is also other platforms we can hit. And some people are Mac users. So I'm going to bring up what it looks like when you download and install Xamarin Studio. This is what Xamarin Studio looks like. And I want you to tell me. I want you to judge for me. Tell me what you think, okay? Because this is Xamarin Studio. And Xamarin used to be their own company. And they got bought by by Microsoft, sorry. They make cross-platform applications for both iOS and Android, right? As well as other platforms. So this is what it looks like, Xamarin Studio. If I say new solution in Xamarin Studio, I get this window. Take a look, right? Okay, nice, nice. So if I want to choose something like a cross-platform app, you can use a Xamarin Forms app, and you can choose either C# or F# as your language. This is on Mac. And you can certainly program an app multi-platform that works with Xamarin Forms. And actually, that's what I would recommend. I don't recommend a app. Yes, you could do that, but I think the Forms application is great to use for iOS and Android. If you're going to do that, do it that way. They also offer an app for Mac, so that is Coco, a Coco app, as well as other game apps, which I would never do because I would program in Unity or Unreal. If I was going to really do a game app these days for iOS or Android, it'd be through another game engine, a real game engine that's going to give me a whole workflow for me to create a game, as opposed to I'm going to program it by hand. Why am I going to hand bomb it? Unless I'm programming my own game engine, in which case I'm probably going to use C++ with OpenGL and forget about all this stuff. Let's be honest, right? So if I was going to go there, might as well. For me to use SpriteKit, SceneKit, or anything like that, doesn't make any sense. I'd rather just use Unity. That's me. Now, if I was going to go to other things, they also allow .NET projects. So if you want to do a C# project with a console or an NT project, you want to build something with C#, I can do that, as well as ASP.NET, like what we're doing now. If I wanted to do Windows Forms, I can't do it, if you notice. There is no Windows Forms application that I could build. Coco would be the closest thing I can do, this one, and it's not Windows Forms by any means. Okay, so that's Xamarin Studio. Now I want you to judge. So let's bring up the application window here today, right? So it's fresh off the market, so to speak, right? And here's Visual Studio, right? The Visual Studio code we use for web application development, but here's Visual Studio, right? Download the Mono framework. I love this stuff because it was working just a second ago, and of course now I have to download and install the Mono framework, which was already downloaded and installed 2 seconds ago, right? But anyways, as you'll see after this happens, it's identical. Like you'll actually see Xamarin, the Xamarin Studio when we bring this stuff up. So is it a step forward for Microsoft? Perhaps. I think if I was going to be nice about it, I would say yes, it is. As I'm downloading and installing stuff in front of you guys, right? Which, again, like I said, today, I tested it today. It worked perfectly. Of course, when I come to class, we get this. So it's a step forward in some ways, but really, they haven't done anything. And I'm not sure what the direction is when it comes to this stuff. I know they make big announcements. It's definitely in preview. And whenever you see something in preview, it means that, that it's not finished yet, which is perfectly fine with me. So here's what it looks like. Here's Visual Studio for Mac for the first time. And this was announced, a couple days ago. So you guys are the first class I'm showing you. So this is kind of the same as what we're used to. I kind of created a few example applications to test things out, right? That's what I would do. And if you would probably do the same thing. If you're making, let's make a small application that I know how to make. So let's try a new project. And notice it's exactly the same, right? Now I know this because I've been a Xamarin user for a while, so I know what it looks like. Now, there might be a couple of additional templates, right, as an example. But really, at the end of the day, and that's for iOS, if I go to my multi-form app, it's exactly the same thing. When it comes to the Mac app, it's exactly the same thing. .NET Core, so anything with .NET, console application or ASP.NET Core empty web application, Same. .NET application with C# or F#. Oh, they included a couple more today. That's interesting. But other than that, at the end of the day, it's exactly the same as Xamarin Forms. So really, we're not quite there yet with Mac, is the answer. Okay? I'm crying. I really would like to, so that I don't have to virtualize anymore. But it is what it is, right? One thing I want to also point out is, I know there's this big controversy all the time. Like, I'm not a Mac user. I'm a PC user because I'm a programmer, right? It rubs me, guys. Honestly, it does. And the reason why is because, like I said to you guys before, you guys should be platform agnostic, truly, right? Because in the future, you don't know what it's going to be, what form it's going to take, right? So don't try and peg yourself as a Mac or PC guy or girl. It's not about that. It's really all around trying to be as flexible as you can be, and to get a job in any industry that's technical, right? That's what the goal is. Of course, if it's something to do with application development, there you want to is where you want to be. Some people may choose to do more game-related stuff, or you might want to be more security-oriented. And I think there's a big opportunity for you to go into the security field as a programmer nowadays. That and maybe big data, maybe, right? Machine learning will be another kind of expanding field. But for me, I think you got to stick to the basics, and some of the stuff you're learning with object-oriented design and programming, those things are transferable skills that you can pass on and do anything you want, whether it's a game or whether it is an application. I still think, though, that to learn games is probably a lot more difficult in many ways than to do just a regular application, because of the complexity involved and what special effects you want to make happen in a game. It doesn't matter whether you're doing something in an engine like Unity or Unreal. It doesn't matter. It all has to do with how complex games can be to make them good, and the different requirements these days to make a game pretty awesome. For example, the tutorialization that we need in games nowadays, and how many apps have a tutorial built into them when you launch? They have them, right? Because they're learning from game development, right? They're saying, hey, one of the greatest things about games are we have really cool tutorials, a safe environment to learn how to use the application, right? Really what you're doing. So they've incorporated that in. Some of the best apps out there. Whether even if it's a mobile app, they have a lot of these, hey, this is how you do it. Are you okay? You can skip it if you really want to you don't want to do the tutorial, or you can follow the tutorial. And I want to show people how to use the app so that they want to use it all the time, so they start using it, right? So that's number one. And then there's feedback, right? How do I give user feedback when they've made a mistake? Right? That's a really important thing for general app development. If I don't give user feedback, whether it's a game or an application, if they've made a mistake, right? Then they need to change something, right? That's on me as a developer, right? So games do that a lot. If you make a mistake in a game, like I'm talking about, let's say Dark Souls. I don't know if anyone ever played Dark Souls 3. Yeah. So if you're a Dark Souls fan, you make a mistake, you're dead, right? But the thing is, they tell you you've made a mistake, right? And it's kind of dramatic, right? Now, it might be something that, maybe an extreme example here, but imagine if it was like that for apps. You made a mistake. Now, this is the way to fix it. Here's what you can do. And it could improve things like, the interest we have. Feedback is really, really important. So those kind of things. And of course, designing the game or application for a specific user in mind is really important as well. So those are the things that are all in common. So to finish off this little thing as I'm loading all my applications and so on, I really like the initiative Microsoft's taken. I think I'm not going to say they've done half measures here. I just think that what they're saying in terms of porting over Visual Studio to Mac, it's not really complete. All right, so today, again, what we're going to do is, if I go back to the Mac side for the PowerPoints, right, is we're looking at data files, right? And to me, data files, there's really two ways of doing data files. There's a simple way of using data files, which is the old way. I got to talk about it. I'm not going to demo it, okay? Because it doesn't make any sense. It's what we used to do. I want you to see it so you can see that it's possible to do that for simple file handling. And then there's the most modern .NET way of doing data file manipulation and so on, using streams. That's what we usually do these days, okay? So there's two parts to this presentation. So again, why data files? And I think this is a key line right here, which is, although most common technique is to use database, sometimes it's overkill. And we want to, like an example of this would be, I'm making a game, going back to games, right? I don't want to save, am I going to put a high score in a database? If I want to share the high score with a bunch of other people, maybe, right? But if it's just for the local, a little local game that you're doing, and you want to share some simple player data or something like that, it's, I mean, especially if you don't want to have a persistent data connection to your server to play the game, it's a little overkill, right? So you need to know how to do those kinds of things. Same thing with other things like properties. You have an application, not a game, and you want to save the application's properties or layout, as an example, because you might have an application that has a certain layout, and you allow the user to customize their layout when they're working in that application. You want to save that locally. You don't want to do that, put it up on a database, right? So you have to connect to the database to save their layout. That doesn't make any sense, right? So I think there's a great opportunity for us to still do data files today. In the future, is that going to be the way? Hell no. I think it's all going to be in the cloud. I think all the smarts that we have today locally are going to be up on the cloud, where it's everywhere and nowhere altogether, right? I think that's where it's going to go. But for now, I think it's important for us to learn how to do data handling locally, yes.
Save for really sensible data like customer information for banks and stuff.
So even sensitive information like I mean, think about who's hosting the cloud these days, and the type of security they're using. Microsoft with Azure, it's pretty rock solid. I mean, yes, can it be hacked? Sure, anything can be hacked. You got a safe, it can be cracked. You've got a security system, it can be hacked. It's just the way it is. If there's a security system out there, there's going to be a hacker for it, right? So is it ultra secure even on your system at home? No, it's not. As long as you're connected to the internet, you're opening yourself up to being hacked, right? That's number one. But to your point, do I want to send sensitive information up on the cloud? I think we're becoming more comfortable with that. Even after all the iCloud attacks, things like LinkedIn got hacked. We've had a bunch of other big companies being hacked. We still trust it. We still trust buying stuff from Amazon, right? We still trust buying games from Xbox through Microsoft, right? We do all that kind of stuff. A lot of us do, PS4 or whatever, directly, through Sony or Microsoft or whatever. And we trust our sensitive information, our credit card information all over the place, right? Even with our tap nowadays, right? You have who uses Apple Pay? Anybody? Right? I use Apple Pay. I go through, bang, tap, I'm gone, right? And you're like, Tom, you're crazy. your credit card's on your phone. Yeah, okay. If you want to steal my credit card, it's a lot easier than stealing it from my phone, right? So yes, is there a security issue? Absolutely, Gabe. I think there could be putting it up on the cloud, but I think it's something that we're unfortunately and fortunately very secure with, where we do it all the time. And once we start going down the road of security, property to your own personal files, your digital persona, if you will. If you think about any other social networks, are you part of social networking at all? Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or anything like that? YouTube, if you do anything with YouTube, whatever, everything is tracked. You buy something on Amazon, it's tracked. You go through Google, it's tracked. You navigate from Toronto to Barrie, it's tracked. They know where you went, right? So if you really want to go crazy, I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities for us to give away our security rights, if you will, and privacy. That's another topic, and I love it, but it's not a topic of this conversation. File I/O, how does it work? Really, it's all about reading and writing. You have a form, you have a data file, you write to the form, you read from the form. Really, that's simple I/O, all right? With file I/O, I'm talking about simple file I/O through C# or even Java. It's almost identical in Java. The only thing you need to do with C# or Java, and I'm getting a little bit of, sorry, I just want to make sure. Are we broadcasting good? Is anyone not having a good broadcast? If we're not, I don't know if there's anyone monitoring. Please send me a Slack so we know that we're broadcasting okay. But the general form is you have some data and it's in a form. You write output to a data file and you read it into another form, or later on you read it back out. And that's what your assignment's all about, right? So thank you. So you write stuff out to the file, so the computer stuff that you're doing with dollar computers, you write this stuff out, and then maybe you're not ready to make that order, and you go back out and you pick it up. How does that work on the web? They use sessions, right, and cookies to store that information a lot of times, or a database that stores your shopping cart, that kind of thing. Those are the two ways that it's being done right now. And I want to buy the next iPad Pro if I'm so inclined, or something else. Maybe I want to buy a Surface, Microsoft Surface Studio, that crazy one that has glitches now, right? If I want to buy that one, And if I put it up on my shopping cart, will Microsoft remember? Most of the times they'll remember up to 24 hours, the answer is, right? Because that's the way sessions expire, over 24 hours or so, right? Sometimes they always remember. You come back to a site after a week, they still know you have a shopping cart there. It really depends on the vendor. But that's the way we can do file input and output on the web. So we're talking about simple file, and again, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to demo it because it's deprecated. I want to talk about it because it exists, and if you might see it in legacy systems out there, especially in places like the government where they still do this stuff, as opposed to file streaming. Okay. All right. So how do you do this simple file out? We really want to use the idea. Here's the general method. We're going to use a file object. That's what we're going to define, and we're going to use the file class to write all text to a file name, and then what's the string to write? That's the general form, right? I can also write all lines, and what am I going to write? An array. I'm going to write an array of data to the file. It's very, very simple, right? And the same thing with I want to append. So these are the three methods that we have here for writing, right? Where I have a file name, and I have a string to write, and this string is going to append to the file. It's going to add on to the end of the file. It's not going to overwrite. The first one, write all text, will just overwrite the file, right? And same thing with write all lines. So those are the methods: write all lines, write all text, write all lines, and append all text. Okay. So pretty straightforward stuff. And here's an example, and I've got a little example here of file. You got a file, your file class, and you write all text to a file called final count, right? And you're writing in an integer, and you're converting it to string. So when you do this toString method, remember that you're converting the integer, whatever it was, count integer, to a string, and you're writing it in this file. And you're writing all text. Okay, here's an example of write all lines, right, where you have a string array of phone data, right? And you create a new string array of 10 elements, right? And what you want to do is you want to write all lines into the same text file, and well, or in this case, it's called textfile.txt, and you're using phone data, which is the actual name of the array, and you're taking that array, and what write all lines does is it iterates through the array, takes all the data from the array, and spits it out into a file. Very, very simple. Okay. So that's writing. Okay. Yes. Yeah. It depends on how your text is set up is the answer. So if you write to the file, and if you don't go a new line, because when you do write all text or whatever, it doesn't necessarily add a new line character. So it just adds a big array of text, right? But if you add if you append, it'll just append on to the end of the file. So depending on what your string is that you're adding, so that could be a trouble situation. Okay, with reading we have a bit of an issue. Always, it doesn't matter whether you're actually doing the new method or the old method. We have a problem because what if you're trying to read data that doesn't exist? It's going to give you an exception, right? It's going to raise an exception is what we like to say, right? That terminology. So when it raises an exception, we have to be able to handle the exception. And we're going to use, of course, exception handling in a try-catch block, so to speak. So here's an example. I'm going to read all text from the file. Here's the file path. I'm going to read all text, and I'm going to store it in a string, whatever the string is. So I'm going to just, whatever the text is, right? And if I'm going to read all lines, this is reading one line, right? If I read all lines, here's all lines, I'm reading the entire file, and I'm putting it into an array, a string array in this particular case, okay? But what if I'm reading past the point where there's no more data? What am I going to do? I'm going to get an error, right? Because I want to keep on reading the next file and the next file and the next file, right? Or the next line and the next line. So here's a try-catch, and we've seen this before. Java, you should have already had try-catch on the Java side, yeah? Right, so exception handling, it's exactly the same. And by the way, it's exactly the same on JavaScript, and C# and a bunch of other languages. Try-catch, yes. It's optional. So if you did this without, in brackets, exception with an object, it would be optional, right? So you could do a simple try-catch statement like this, and it would completely work, right? So too in JavaScript. Actually, you can port the JavaScript right into here, and it'd be identical. So again, you have your string array. In this case, it's called file string, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the file class to read all lines from this textfile.txt. By the way, where is this textfile.txt located? If you write or read from textfile.txt, it's inside of your bin debug folder. Okay, we're going to talk about that. So if I launch a new application here, and I'll call it lesson 10 today, which is all around I/O, right? So let's, I'm just going to target a new lesson altogether. So we'll do Windows, and we'll say it's a new Windows application, Windows Forms application, which we're going to call COMP1004 F2016, and it's going to be lesson 10. Since we're starting this off, of course, I'm going to store it in the right folder. That's for me. And then I'm going to put it up on GitHub automatically. Remember, we talked about this. I'm going to press OK. This is going to create a new project. And when I create the new project, I have a form. And I might as well go right into my Team Explorer and click Sync so I can connect to GitHub, right? I'm going to click create a new GitHub repository by using the built-in extension for Visual Studio. Click on Publish to GitHub. And if you notice here, if I scroll down, if I choose Georgian, right, that's my organization. And here's my GitHub repo that I'm going to create, right? Yes?
On a bit of an aside, but not really, when we're inviting you to a private repo, is it Tom Silly Octopus or is it Georgian College?
I would recommend that you use my last name at hotmail.com. That's the best way to use it, right? So if you invite me to my last name at Hotmail, and if I don't have access, I'll ask you for access. Don't worry, okay. Right? But either one, I still have access. It just means that it won't be Tsioliopoulos at Hotmail. I won't be able to fork your stuff as much if I really wanted to do that. I would still have access, whatever, no matter which email you use. Tom.Tsioliopoulos@gmail.
When you're inviting to a repo, it's your username.
If it says Tsioliopoulos, yeah, that's me, yeah. Then it's Tsioliopoulos at Hotmail. If you go Tom Tsioliopoulos, that's my company that I use for little dribs and drabs, right? Either way, it's fine. Don't worry about it, right? I feel like a guy from Jersey now because we talked about Jersey, yeah, right? Forget about it, right? Publish, right? We're going to publish. And when we publish, we're going to publish out to the organization, Georgian College. And why am I bringing this up? Because if you look at the project structure, do you see a debug folder or a bin folder? No, it's hidden, of course. So if you look at it here, show all files, that's the icon. You're going to see there's a bin folder. And underneath that, there's going to be a debug folder. So inside the debug folder, inside here is where all of my files by default are going to be stored. Now, you can certainly direct them somewhere else, right? But by default, when you save something, unless you specifically put down a path, it's going to be going here. Why? Because when I deploy in one of our classes, probably week 13 or so, I'm going to talk about deployment. I want to actually deploy an app fully with a wizard to create, kind of almost an installation. So if you want to make an application and then you want to install it later on, how do you do that? We're going to be talking about that around week 13, so you know how to do that for Windows. Okay, so this is where it's going to go. It's going to go into this path here, bin debug. Right? So if you save it, you're like, oh my God, Tom, where my files go? They're here. Okay. So you can get to that by using the third icon from the right, which is show all files, and it'll show all the files but are not currently visible. Okay. You could make them visible if you really want to. If I right-click on bin, and if I say include in project, it will be visible. But why? You don't need to see that, right? So leave it as is for now, my recommendation. And also best practices for Microsoft Windows Forms says not to include bin as part of your project. Okay, so that's the first thing. So the first thing is this piece when it comes to where it's being stored. Here in the try catch, just to go over try catch a little bit more before we continue, in our try, we're saying, hey, try to read this stuff. What happens if we don't find any data? Well, then we do this, right? And sometimes if we can't find the file's been removed. That's another issue with reading. Then you're going to get an error, and there's different kinds of errors you can get if the file doesn't exist, right? So always, and I'm going to check for this in your assignment 4. Please wrap any kind of reading of files, even in your new file system, file stream, with a try catch. Because I will break your files. It's very simple. I'll just take your file away and see what happens, right? You shouldn't allow that. It should say file doesn't exist, but it shouldn't crash your program. Try not to allow anybody to crash your code ever, all right? So always wrap stuff in a try-catch at the very minimum, right? All right, next. So this one here is the read all lines method, and this one is the read all text method. There's a little different between one and the other. So here, you're going to read the entire file into one string, right? This file string, the entire file's in here, and then we got to parse through it, which is kind of weird. Again, different methodologies allow us to create, and from there we can split. If you notice, we're splitting the file string, which is one big string, and we're looking for any new line characters. And every time we see a new line character, we're going to split the string, and we're going to assign it to as an element of the array. That's what's going to happen. So this is actually a very quick way of creating an array called a field string, right? And initializing it all in one step. All right, that's what it's doing. Because basically what you're doing with split is you're creating elements as you iterate through the, as you're reading the files. Okay? Okay, so that's what this does. And I just showed you this, bin debug. As an example, that's where your files are going to go. All right, now, the real stuff. .NET file handling. So that was simple I/O. Now, in order for us to use .NET file handling, we need to use using system I/O. So we need to put that in there, okay? So if I want to save something, a little piece of data, as an example, to a file, right? Then we got to use this using statement. Let me give you an example. Let's build a little form, a few pieces of data to the file. We're going to talk about this as an example and see what the problems are associated with this, right? So I have a form. It is empty, and I'm going to call this the save form. Okay, very simple. Save form. We're going to save stuff to the file. A write. We're going to write first. Remember, writing is easier than reading, right? So this is a save form. We're going to rename this form. So do it with me, guys. So we're going to say file, rename, and we're going to call this the save form, right? Save form. And there's different things we can do with the save form. For now, all I want to do is save my first name and last name to a file, all right? And of course, we're going to do some minor modification to the properties of this form that we've seen lots and lots of times, right, with our save form. So if I bring up my properties window a little bit, let's just say hide Solution Explorer. And if I look down here, my form text should say something like the same thing, save form, right? And yeah, I've called it save form, which is really, really cool. I want to start this off in the center of my screen. And maybe what I want to do is drag and drop some buttons and so on in here. Again, common controls that I would use are probably some kind of label, right? So this would be the first name label. We've done this lots of times before, but good to see it again. First name label. And again, I probably want to say something like first name here. Just for speed, right? We're not going to change the font size. We're going to make it, keep it the same, because I want to go get this done as soon as possible. Here's first name. And then what I want to do is I want to have some kind of text box. So here's my text box. Whoop, here we are. And in the text box, I want to call this the first name text box, right? First name text box. Nice and easy. Right, so I've got my first name label and my first name text box. We can make this a little larger because my first name might be very long, right? Anastasios, right? Yes? The toolbar? This toolbox? If you don't have it, if you've done something like this, you mean? Right? It's gone, right? It's not there anymore. I've X'd it. Xing it actually removes it from the set. Go to View. And if you go to Toolbox, it'll come back, right? Wherever it was, right? And if you want to tear it off, let's say, for example, it's completely torn off, like a real problem, right? People get confused with this one. So it's torn off. So it's over here somewhere, right? Floating. Woo! Right? Don't panic, because you can always put it back. Now notice the little buttons that come up. This is the top, right? This is the middle. This is the left. This is the far left. This is where I want it to go. And depending on where I put it, it'll go across these areas, right? I can also choose just right over here to combine it, and it will. It'll combine with whatever's there. And then I can just unpin it again, and it's back to my dock. Most of you should know how to do that by now, but it's okay. I know I run into that problem all the time where I lose a toolbar or something like that. Okay, so I've got this first name and whatever. I'm going to do my last name, so I'm going to copy and paste. So copy both and paste. slide it to the left so it's kind of aligned. You have your little magic bars that come up that tell us that we're aligning properly. And now I'm going to call this, of course, last name label. I have to rename these. And it's going to say last name instead of first name. And this is going to be the last name text box. So nice and easy for you. Last name text box. Right? Okay, and that's it. So now I want a save button. Click the save button. It's going to save that data into a predetermined hard-coded file. Whoa, why would I ever want that? I wouldn't, is the answer. And we're going to get to the point where we don't need to use a hard-coded file. We can decide to use something else. We're going to modify this again. So let's bring in a button. Here's a button. And we're going to call this the save button. There we go. And if I scroll all the way down, I can call this save. There we go. So there's a save button. And we've got our little bit of data. And we're going to save this data. Yes. Like change the name of the text, and it'll change the name of the button as well. Because everyone has different conventions. Like for example, I used I like to make, you know, first name label, right? If you talk to Rich, he says no. I do LBL first name, and everything is LBL. And the reason why he likes to come up from an IntelliSense perspective, right? So that's why he likes to do it that way. So because there's no hard hard convention on how to do this, they can't produce that, right? Because they might do something you don't like, and therefore they don't do anything. Okay, so I've got my little form. Let's run it, just by the way it is, just to make sure it runs properly and it shows the right way. Bit of an issue, right? Now I can also make my form grow, right? I can make it shrink. So it's like really small like this and useless. I don't want that to happen with my forms. And for you guys, you should prevent this from happening for your assignment 4. I haven't really talked about it too much, and I'm not going to dock you if you didn't take care of it for assignment 1, 2, 3. But I want you to take care of this. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so sometimes when the comment is, I make a form for people who are watching online. I make a form like a splash screen, and it's okay when you design it, but when you actually run the program, it looks a little different, right? It's because of your resolution and the way we set things up on your machine. By default, your Windows forms will align to the resolution of your native resolution of your machine, right? So then it'll whack it out. The way to fix that is to use some kind of layout. When I haven't really like been formal on layouts, right? Like for example, a grid layout that we did that one time, right? Yes.
I had the same problem.
Yeah.
And I found Windows 10 by default has my font set to 35%.
Yeah.
If you fix that, it fixes everything.
Yeah. So if you change your viewable, so that's a very good point. Windows 10 messes it up too. Did you have a comment as well? Yeah.
Would it be best practice to look for a certain design and stretch it out, like a design of a certain size?
Like a default size? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I recommend. There's 2 possibilities. One, you want to test the form so that it shows everything the way you like it. Like for example, I want the form name to show. That means I got to make it at least this long, right? I don't care to minimize, or I don't care to maximize. Sorry, so maximizing I want to turn off. I want to turn that off. If I want to press X to remove, stop doing the saving thing, yes, I want to do that. So just from a form design perspective, I'm probably going to turn this functionality off right now and make this form a fixed size. So I can't change the size of my form at all, right? That's recommended, right? You don't want to make it. Yeah. Yeah, there's, you know what? There's another framework we use more often, which is Windows Presentation Foundation, WPF, which is the advanced framework with XML that we use with Windows to do that. And again, it's where we're going. Microsoft is going towards an XML-based layout, right? Just like Android, as an example, where it's more responsive to different viewport sizes, right? This, what we're showing you here with rapid application development, is using the old system that's not responsive, right? You could make it responsive with code, right? And the way to do that is if you change the resolution, or if you can detect the resolution and then adjust your layout. But it's bulky and it's complex. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and you might as well use WPF if you're going to go there. And nowadays, let's face it, a lot of the applications we're building are web-based, right? Web-enabled. Okay, so so let's talk about this. We've got this little form. I want to change this. Let's go back and make some minor changes. And again, this is just so where is it? It's in our. If I click on the form itself, and if I go to my border style, form border style, notice it's sizable. I want to turn from sizable, right, to fixed single or fixed 3D, one of the two, right? If I'm making a dialog, a custom dialog, I might choose fixed dialog, right? If I'm going to choose a dialog box, right? If I make my own custom one. We're going to be talking about dialog boxes today. All right, so fixed single, it will not allow me to change the size. One thing I also want to do is I want to take away the ability for maximizing, right? So notice that it has my control box is there, right? Here's my control box. And then if I scroll down a little bit, there's something called maximize button we've talked about before. I'm just going to put this to false, so you can't maximize. So it's going to always stay the same size now. Sorry. Thank you for that. I just chose the wrong one. I looked at one and I chose the other one. There we go. Perfect. Thank you for that. So save it and then try it again now. And if it doesn't work properly, notice I can't resize my form and I can't maximize. I can minimize. Minimization is okay because sometimes I don't want to save anything. So I want to put my first name and last name in here. This is what I want to do, and then click save. Right? When I click save, it's going to go right out to, you're laughing. It's going to go right out to the form. Tell me. Silly octopus?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay. Look, people used to call me Tommy Alphabet all the time, right? So it's like, because they couldn't pronounce it. Because my real name's not Tom, of course. If you're Greek or if you're, European or Brazilian or wherever, you might have a long name like this and you make it Tom, or something like that, right? Because it's easier for Canadians to pronounce, right? So my mother told me this. She said this. She says, listen, Tom, or actually it was Anastasios. Anastasios Tiliopoulos. It was like 30 letters, right? I was a kid. I was like, in grade school, learning how to, it goes, it's either Tom or Tony. Which one do you want? And I said, definitely not Tony, right? I said, Tony's not for me, right? Tom is better. Because then, I don't know why I knew that when I was a kid, but anyway. That's how it came about. That's yeah, it's really weird, right? I don't know why. Usually it's, you make it smaller, typically, right? Or you make it Canadianized, right? Yeah.
Entering the file name, which is exactly 8 letters, which is my name. Labeling it as exactly 11 letters.
Well, you know what I'm saying? It's very interesting. And here's the other thing, just as an aside. I know this is kind of aside stuff, but here's the question: should I change my name? Is another issue, right? I mean, nowadays I'm a Greek guy, right? And if you're a Greek guy, you know what I'm talking about. Or even if you're a person who's from Europe, right? My name is very long and difficult to pronounce. So should I change my name to something easy for you to pronounce? That's what it means, right? Should I change my name to that? Should I change my name to Sentinel or or Lookout? Tom Lookout, right? Because that's what it means. My name means that, right? And people do that. Like there's a friend of mine. His last name is Furnos, right? Furnos, which means like oven, right? And so he changed his last name to Baker, right? I don't know. So anyway, my dad made the plunge. He says, you know what? I can't do business with Tiliopoulos because no one can pronounce it. They call me Silly Octopus, right? So I'll change my last name to Charles. Dad, it's 2 first names. I don't understand. But anyways. So if you double click on this, we're going to go back to this piece, right? Where the save button is where all our functionality is going to be. Now we know we need to use our using statement, right? So I'm just going to branch it out here. So this is required for file IO. Right? We need a using statement that says, remember what the using statement is, right? System.io. If you don't use system.io, no file handling is required. Okay? System.io, it includes the library going back to something like a C++, it's like an include, right? Or even PHP, include, right? And what we're doing is we're requiring that library to be part of our code, right? Now, the reason why all languages operate like this, every modern language, Java, C#, C++ for sure, other languages like that, Python, JavaScript too, is because we don't want to make our code fat, right? When I include system.io, I've just included a hell of a large library, right? It's massive. It can do a lot of stuff, right? And if I only use one little part of it, some part of myself says, maybe I should use that simple I/O we talked about in the beginning, where I don't have to use anything. All right, so one part is this, system.io. Okay, and I've kind of spent some time talking about that because if I don't do system.io, then I won't be able to use any file handling stuff, like streams. So there's two parts. There is something called a stream reader, and there's something called a stream writer, okay? So I want to make a stream reader to read data from the data stream, and I want to use stream writer to write data to the data stream, right? Why this is good is it's because it's compatible with our save file dialog boxes that comes up, you know, the regular save file dialog when you want to save a file. That is a standard dialog box that we can use, and it's compatible with stream reader and stream writer a lot more than the other older way. That's one. And also, when we save stuff with stream reader and stream writer, we can save it as an object. We can choose binary format. So for someone who's programming a game and you want to save your game data as a data file as opposed to a plain text file. So that, from a security perspective, it doesn't have to be plain text all the time. Using binary write. Okay, so the steps to write data. We need to declare a new stream writer object, right? That's number one. 2, use the stream writer's write line method to copy the stuff from the buffer into memory onto the file, right? And then 3, call the stream writer's close method, right? So when we do a new stream writer object, which declares the name of the data file, right? We're actually doing two things. We're saying if it doesn't exist, create it. If it exists, write to it. Okay, that's what it's doing. So here's the general form, right? Where we're using stream writer, the object name, stream writer, or we'll just call it writer, right? Is equal to new stream writer and the file name. Okay. Now there is this Boolean append, which means if I'm writing to it, this Boolean option gives me the ability for me to append to a file as opposed to overwrite the file, right? And it tells you that. In the second version of the general form, you can specify that you want to append data to an existing file by using the true keyword. If you don't do that, it's going to overwrite the information, ever, right? So let's try this out. How do we do this? Not yet. One thing at a time, right? You're advanced, right? Let's keep going. So what I want to do is I want to say, first of all, I have two things I want to save, right? So first, like we said, I want to create in my save button a stream writer object. So I'm going to say stream writer, right? I'm going to call this writer is equal to a new stream writer object. And now it takes, there's 8 overloads, not just 2, right? The first one is just the name of the stream. If we have anything, then there's the string path. That's the other option, which is the file name. And then, of course, the type of encoding. If I want to write in binary, I could do that as well. And then another one is a string path with a Boolean append, which I showed you. That's very common to use, right? As well as the stream, the encoding method, and the buffer size, which is totally different, right? And others. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But the one we want to use is something like this. The file name, for example, we'll call it names.txt. Right? And of course, we want to append. Okay, that's the stream writer that we just made. So that's step 1. Step 2, go back to this. So once we've done this stream writer thing, we want to use the write line method, right, to copy the data to a buffer in memory, right? That's what it does. So we're going to use the stream writer's write line method. Okay, let's go back. So stream writer, right, which is, that's the object, dot write line. Use write, what happens? It goes in the same line on the file, just like normal, right? If I go write line, it actually writes the write line. And then you can, what are you going to write? What's the text that you want to write? Well, of course, it's going to be first name text box dot text, right? And I also want to do a writer.writeLine. If I want, you can do different ways. Of course, I'm just doing one line. First name, last name text box.text. Right, there we go. That's step 2. So step 1. Step 1. Open a stream. Right, which is the write stream, stream writer. Step 2. Write to the buffer. Right, write to the stream buffer. Right, and step 3. Close the file, which we're going to use writer.close. Nice and easy methods. Okay. So worst case scenario, this will write, if we did things correctly, to the stream. Let's test it, see what happens, just like this. So I'm going to kind of run the file, and I'll put some names in there, Tom Vanguard, right? Because Tom's up and save. Yay! Okay, now I'm going to choose another name. Now notice I have a problem. John Smith. Right? Save. Right? We'll use Jane Doe. There we go. Save. Right? We've saved 3 names. We don't know if it works. Let's see what happens. I'm going to exit out of here. Did it work? Didn't cause me an error. So we didn't have an exception. So it didn't error up, but we don't know if it did anything. There's no feedback to tell me that something's been done. Right? We talked about feedback earlier. Let's see if this works. So if I go back in here, and if I look at the hidden files and folders, go to my bin, and if I did it correctly, then down here there should be a names.txt file, which there is. If I double click, it should show everything I put in there. If it didn't, something went wrong. Right? Did anyone else have a problem with this piece? Okay, so now, challenge. I want to write it on the same line. What do I do, right? It's actually no challenge at all, right? Yes? It won't do? Yeah. No styling. Here you can do the same thing. You can style it the way you want. So if my string, I can add spacing, and I can add, now tabbing will not be allowed, but things like spacing, you can use special characters, however. You can use a tab character, backspace characters, all the escape characters that you normally would use with a string, you can do here with the file. That's why file stream is so powerful, right? Again, what I want to do is, if I want to put it all on one line, what could I do? I could concatenate the 2. I could do that. I could also use write. If I use stream the writer.write, it'll write to the same line over and over again. Yes? I went to the right. So notice there's here the third icon from the right in my Solution Explorer is called Show All Files. And if you click that, you'll see the bin folder. And then underneath the bin folder, there'll be the debug folder. And there's where my names.txt is going to be. All right, by default. Okay? Yes?
Did anyone answer how to get it on one line yet?
I kind of answered it, but go ahead. Yeah, tell me. You can put that's concatenation. So you can concatenate. So what you would do is, if you go to your save form in here, and you want to put these on one line, then you can use one write line. And the concatenation method would be first name textbox.text, as an example, plus last name textbox.text. But you want to put some kind of extra spacing in the middle, right? Now, what if you wanted to do last name first? You could do that with a comma, right? If you really want to do that. But if you want to put first name, last name like we have it, you can go something like plus, space, and then another plus, and then last name textbox.text. And that would write to the file. So that's one thing we can do. Here's another problem I have. When I click the save button, okay, from a functionality perspective, I want you to think about this. You see what I did? I had to kind of go back in there and rewrite stuff. I think what's important is if I save, there's 2 things that should happen. One, are you sure? It should always be anything kind of saving or whatever, or deleting, are you sure? right? Reading is no problem. Reading, you're not changing anything. But if I'm saving or deleting, you should ask me if I'm sure. Number one. Two, if I click save, it should wipe out my data. Allow me to save again, right? That's pretty simple stuff. So let's try the second piece first. So how do I clear my data? I could do something like, well, first name textbox.clear, right? And last name textbox.clear, right? And also what I want to do is I want to give focus to my first name text box again, right? That's another important thing. So I want to say something like, I want to clear the text boxes and say first name textbox.focus. So those are the three things I want to kind of do afterwards. And what this does is it clears the form, right? So it clears, or we'll say resets the form fields. We've seen that before. And you can actually make that a little method, right? If you really want to, too. Just extract those three lines, make it a method. And then you can say whatever it is, instead of first name text box, it could be whatever the sender is, clear that, right? Or whatever the objects are, if you had multiple forms. Okay, so pretty simple. Now, how do the other piece was more difficult. What do I do if I want to say, are you sure, right? I want to say, are you sure? Do you want to save? How do I ask that question? A what? A warning message. Okay. I could, but what's that message called? I'm gonna come back to you guys because I know you know the answers, right? But what is and I'll ask you guys if Gabe doesn't get it. So what's the function? Message box. Okay. So now I'm gonna go back to the other team there. So what would you write in the message box? The other guys that put up their hand. Okay. Let's try this out. So I want to do this. So before I do any of this stuff, before I do the saving piece, which is all this piece, all this stuff, right, is what I'm talking about here, right? So that means that I've got to put this in some kind of block. Here's a code block. I know that this is all going to be in a code block, right? Am I allowed to do this? Yeah, I can, yeah. Yes, that's what I would do. So I would say something like, and you can do it all in one line if you really want to. Dialog result is equal to message box as an example. And in the message box, you could say something like, remember message box itself, message box.show, right? And the message box has a bunch of overloads. There's 21 overloads. Notice there's the string text. That's the first one. The second overload is the owner and the string text and the string caption. Now it says, notice that it says text, the string to display in the message box, and the string caption, if I go to the next one, so this would be like, are you sure? Right? And then the caption text, right, would be the one that you want to put in here. So if I do something like my caption, now notice what it says, the text to display in the caption, right? Now which is the caption and what's the message box? What's the caption? The title, right? Is it the title or is it the message? Always, right? So you're going to say confirm, like you said, right? And so that's what comes down to this. So I'm saying here's my dialog result, right? And I'm going to say if result, right, is equal to dialog result dot okay, right? If that's true, and it's double equals, of course, Tom, not single equals. We've done this before. Then, right? Now, why is it giving me this issue? Semicolon expected, because over here, right? So if it says, if my result of whatever I got from my dialog, right? If the result is dialog result is okay. By the way, you can add in message box buttons if I want OK cancel, which is probably what I would do too. If I would say something like message box buttons dot OK cancel, that's what I want for my message box. I'd probably put that in there as well. So that would customize the way my message box is going to look, right? And then, what was that? Yes, no is fine too. Are you sure? Yes, no, OK cancel. If I put yes, no, that's also another one you can put in. No. That means that this would be incorrect. This would have to be yes, right? If it's correct, if my dialog, if the dialog result is yes, then do all this stuff. Otherwise, do nothing. Right? How about this? If it's not correct, if I'm not ready, what do I want to really do? Well, I might want to clear it, but I may not want to do that because maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe what I want to do is I want to focus, give my focus back to the first name and highlight everything. Maybe that's what I want to do. So how do I do that? This is just review for you guys, for people who've done this. Else, again, don't worry about the formatting for now. I'll fix the formatting. Else, if I get a negative result, if it's no, right? What I want to do is I want to say first name text box, right? Dot focus, and I want to say first name text box dot select all. That'll give it an option for the person to select everything, and then retype their name, and it'll start them off at the first name text box again, right? Worst case scenario. Let's see that functionality in place. Again, I'll show you the whole code that we've got in there. Right, this is inside that click event, right? Is this not understandable for somebody? Right, at this point, I think week 10, we should all know how to do this kind of stuff, right? Now, you may not do it my way. Doesn't matter. But you should all know how to do something like this, right, at this point. Okay, let's try this out and see what happens. So Tom, and we'll say my big long last name this time, right? And I want to click save, and it says, are you sure? No, I don't. No, I'm not sure. So it highlights Tom. Hey, buddy.
We're bringing some free food.
Keith, you got your wish, buddy. You got your wish, buddy, right? Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. You're the best.
Maybe we better let the professor pick his choice, eh?
Thank you so much. We're getting pizza today for some reason.
We're going to deduct the percent from all your final marks.
Thanks, Rich. Right. See you later. All right, so let's say we accept. Go ahead, guys. So if we accept, right? Come on, be nice. I told you there's some nice pizza here. Actually, this is a great place to take a small break since we're breaking for pizza, right? And for people who are not here, it's woe be to you. You didn't come in today because there's pizza and some muffins, right? So I'll take a small break and we'll come back and we'll continue with this example.